Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. To my super chat. I can't do this without you. Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, JD Vance, unless something unforeseen or cataclysmic takes place, will be the next president of the United States of America after President Trump. He will likely have Marco Rubio as his vice president. I don't see NEWSOM or AOC having really any chance. NEWSOM, a better chance than AOC, but NEWSOM would have to convince the entire country that making America a blue state is a good thing. So that gives JD Vance the presidency. Hit subscribe to this channel. He might not have the charisma of President Trump, okay, but he's better at he's somewhat better at articulating certain thoughts, and he's very good with media. And so President Trump is a one-man wrecking crew when it comes to media politics. He's just amazing in so many ways. You can have the entire American media against him, the government, everything, society, and he'll win 2 elections. He'll be a 2-time president, Donald Trump, because he stands for a whole bunch of things that Americans want. And he's a great president. JD Vance doesn't have those kind of superpowers, but he has his own advantages. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. Hit subscribe. You're looking at the next president after President Trump, JD Vance.
From Indiana to discuss plans for redistricting ahead of next year's midterm elections.
What does We spoke with the governor, with the Speaker of the House there in Indiana, and the Senate President, and the message I delivered is pretty straightforward. We want a unified Republican team. We want to fight together, win together, make big things happen for the American people, and obviously the people of the state of Indiana together. But one of the things that you see in a lot of red states is blue states have really aggressively gerrymandered such that they've actually made it harder for the majority of the state of Indiana to have their voice heard in their federal elections. Because if California has crazy gerrymanders, Illinois has crazy gerrymanders, New York has crazy gerrymanders, what it does is it actually suppresses the will of the people in states like Indiana. And the other thing that we talked about, and I didn't even realize this, Maria, until a couple of years ago, that for apportioning representatives, you actually count illegal aliens. So even though illegal aliens theoretically are not supposed to vote, we know sometimes they do, you still count illegal aliens for congressional apportionment. So California has way more House seats than it should because they have such a high population of illegal aliens. So they get rewarded for welcoming illegal aliens into their state, giving them federal benefits, actually asking the taxpayers of states like Ohio to subsidize them. And then those same taxpayers in Ohio and Indiana and elsewhere, they have fewer congressional representatives because of what California has allowed to happen. That's ridiculously unfair. And the only real way to fight back against it is for us to redistrict in some ways as aggressively as these hard blue states have done.
Well, that's an important point, and that is why President Trump said that he wants more work or new work on a new census.
Yes.
How does that change the GOP makeup and the electoral votes?
Yeah, so another crazy thing that I had no idea about, but everybody, even Democrats actually admit this, that the census in 2020 had a major statistical error. And what that meant is that you actually undercounted a few states that are Republican, like Florida and Ohio. You overcounted some blue states. And so what I understand, if you actually did the census anew right now, you would have 10 additional Republican seats and 9 fewer Democrat seats. And really what we're living with, Maria, is the consequence.
So that's the type of thing that he can articulate that God bless President Trump can't really articulate in the same manner. President Trump has his own communication style. It works. It drives wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrats apoplectic and livid, but it works. President Trump has a unique communication style. JD Vance has a more, the ability to communicate in a more, maybe I don't want to say cerebral, but in more of a manner that perhaps will resonate more after President Trump's second term. Let's put it that way. Okay, AOC can't articulate her thoughts in this manner. Newsom doesn't really articulate it. He can't articulate his thoughts in this manner. Okay, he just explained how the census was skewed to help Democrats by counting undocumented immigrants. Okay, he did that in 2 seconds. And that's a topic that most people don't understand.
Of 40 years of institutional control in the Democratic Party, these guys have fought very dirty for a very long time. And they haven't just won elections and enacted laws that we may not agree with. They have tried to rig the game for Democrats and against Republicans. And thankfully, under President Trump's leadership, you finally see some spine. You finally see some backbone in the Republican Party to fight back against these very aggressive Democratic dirty tricks. But the only way for us to do it is to actually go and do the hard work to reset the scales a little bit. What we want to do is redo the census, but importantly, we want to redistrict some of these red states, and we want to make the congressional apportionment fair in this country. Again, you cannot do it unless Republicans actually take some very decisive action in the months to come. We think they will, and we're obviously supporting them every step of the way.
But do you worry that as Republicans do that, the Democrat blue states are going to do the same thing, and then you'll have redistricting in California, New Jersey, and so on?
You know, Maria, there's just not a whole lot of juice left out of that lemon. The Democrats have already gone as far as they possibly can. Let me give you a crazy statistic. So I believe that it's in New Jersey, Illinois, New York, California, and there's one other Democrat state where you take those 5 states, you have a large number of Democrat representatives. But here's the crazy statistic. President Trump won 43% of those 5 states, and Democrats have something like 85% of the representatives out of those states. You cannot gerrymander these far left states anymore, and that's the whole point. We have unilaterally disarmed in the Republican Party. We have said to the Democrats, if you want to rig the game in your favor in blue states, go ahead. We're going to do nothing to fight back against it. That's crazy. It makes it harder for us to pass our agenda. It makes it harder for us to win elections. And most importantly, it gives Democrats this ability to run roughshod over the country without any pushback from the American people. The democratic system in this country is broken because who you vote for doesn't necessarily get reflected in who your representatives are. We're just trying to rebalance the scales and frankly push back against a very unfair system created by the Democrats.
Unbelievable. Let me move on to foreign policy, because President Trump is expected to meet with Vladimir Putin at some point, perhaps in the coming week. What are you expecting?
Well, first of all, I've got to give the president a huge amount of credit here, Maria, because this is a major breakthrough for American diplomacy. If you go back, this war's been going on for over 3 years at this point, well over 1 million Russians and Ukrainian dead soldiers. And as the president says, the numbers are probably much higher than the official tally indicates. There has been no substantial breakthrough. And for 6 months, the president himself, he's asked me, he's asked Secretary Rubio, of course, Steve Witkoff, we have been aggressively working, trying to break the logjam. One of the most important logjams is that Vladimir Putin said that he would never sit down with Zelensky, the head of Ukraine, and the president has now got that to change. We're at a point now where we're now trying to figure out, frankly, scheduling and things like that around when these 3 leaders could sit down and discuss an end to this conflict. Now, what do I think is ultimately going to come out of this? Look, it's actually very simple. If you take where the current line of contact between Russia and Ukraine is, we're going to try to find some negotiated settlement that the Ukrainians and the Russians can live with, where they can live in relative peace, where the killing stops. It's not going to make anybody super happy. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians probably at the end of the day are going to be unhappy with it. But I don't think you can actually sit down and have this negotiation absent the leadership of Donald J. Trump. And the president said this to me today privately, said, look, maybe this works out, maybe it doesn't, but it's worth the effort. It's worth trying. And we're going to keep on using the diplomatic influence of the President of the United States to accomplish an end to this conflict. And Maria, you know this, but other people may not. If you look at the president's foreign policy accomplishments, if you look at Congo, Rwanda, a war that went on for 30 years, killed 6 million people. If you look at the number of hostages in Israel, in Gaza, who have been released and gone back to their families. If you look at Malaysia, Cambodia, you look at all of these terrible conflicts, the president has shown a willingness to be the president of peace. It's a big, big testament to the quality of American leadership. And it's an amazing thing to have a president who's working to stop the killing when you've had for so many generations presidents who didn't care about bringing peace to these very conflict-torn regions of the world. It's something I think all Americans should be proud of, whatever their political party.
Do you want Putin to meet with Zelensky before a meeting with President Trump?
I actually don't think it would be that productive. I think fundamentally the president of the United States has to be the one to kind of bring these two together. We're, of course, going to talk to the Ukrainians. I actually spoke with the Ukrainians this morning. Marco has been talking to them quite a bit. We're going to keep that dialogue open, but fundamentally, this is something where the president needs to force President Putin and President Zelensky really to sit down to figure out their differences. We, of course, condemn the invasion that happened. We don't like that this is where things are, but you've got to make peace here. And the only way to make peace is to sit down and talk. You can't finger point. You can't, wag your finger at somebody and say, you're wrong, we're right.
Can my dad go from
Peace is to have a decisive leader sit down and force people to come together.
You did not want to send taxpayer dollars to Ukraine and taxpayer funded arms to Ukraine. Do you feel that the current state of affairs improve that, whereas the U.S. will sell weapons to NATO countries and they will go ahead and send the weapons?
Well, two things on that. First of all, I think the reason that we reached this decisive moment, a real change in where we were, is because the president was willing to apply some significant pressure and actually say, if you don't come to the table, the American people, we're not going to get involved in this war directly. We have a lot of economic points of leverage, and we're willing to use those to bring about peace. And that was a big thing that happened. To your point about weapons, what we said to the Europeans is simply, first of all, this is in your neck of the woods. This is in your back door. You guys have got to step up and take a bigger role in this thing. And if you care so much about this conflict, you should be willing to play a more direct and a more substantial way in funding this war yourself. I think the president, and I certainly think that America, we're done with the funding of the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. We want to stop the killing. But Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money, their tax dollars to this particular conflict. But if the Europeans want to step up and actually buy the weapons from American producers, we're okay with that, but we're not going to fund it ourselves anymore.
What about Israel? Benjamin Netanyahu today said that he is going to take full control of Gaza. Is that the right move?
Well, ultimately, that's up to Benjamin Netanyahu. Obviously, there are a lot of downsides, a lot of upsides to that. But I think fundamentally what we're trying to accomplish for America's perspective is, number one, we want to make this so that Hamas cannot kill innocent people, Israelis, Americans, or anybody else. Number two, we want the hostages to come home. And number three, the president's been very clear that you do have a humanitarian crisis there, where you have a lot of innocent people who are really struggling. And we want to make sure that the people of Gaza are able to get food, able to get medicine, and so forth. And so we're trying to accomplish all three of those things. And what the president has said is he wants to be, again, the president of peace. He is encouraging through every diplomatic method possible a rapid end to the conflict. The hostages get to come home. The people of Gaza get a free flow of humanitarian aid. That's what we're working towards, and we're going to keep on working with our allies in the region to make that happen.
Coming up, a Russia collusion, Jeffrey Epstein, and a subpoena for the Clintons. And the potential for a Vance Marco Rubio ticket.
So, ladies and gentlemen, not many people are super excited at this very moment to talk about 2028, but it's important. It's really important. And you want Trump Republicans to continue to have the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, all the intel agencies that were leveled against Trump. If or when the House goes to Democrats, all they'll do in their typical wonderful, morally superior, hysterical manner is impeach Trump 50 times. And that's only going to help J.D. Vance. Also, the proximity to President Trump being vice president, that alone will catapult Vance into the presidency. All he has to do is just remain, a true, loyal vice president in the manner that every other Democratic vice president was also. And he has it. It's his in 2028. But let's continue. I mean, isn't it interesting if you spend more than a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes listening to JD Vance, you can tell he has intelligence. There's wisdom there. It's not, he doesn't use euphemisms. He doesn't just talk about, like, it's not political talking points. Like if you hear NEWSOM talk, you hear AOC, you hear any Democrat, there's always talking points and euphemisms and pretending there's somebody they're not. But let's continue here. Hit subscribe if you're new. I can tell this is not the most the most exciting live stream for a lot of people. By the way, Paul Bartlett, thank you so very much. As always, to my super chat, thank you. Maria Bartiromo is absolutely fantastic. Let's continue to listen to her interview JD Vance.
Stay with us on Sunday Morning Futures for more.
Meanwhile, we're still waiting for accountability on the whole Russia collusion made-up story.
Yes.
Now that DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, has released all of those classified documents, we're actually seeing who was behind all of this. Do you want to see indictments?
I absolutely want to see indictments, Maria. Look, of course, you got to have the law follow the facts here. You don't just indict people to indict people. You indict people because they broke the law. But if you look at what Tulsi and Kash Patel have revealed in the last couple of weeks, I don't know how anybody can look at that and say that there wasn't aggressive violations of the law. What they basically did is they defrauded the American people in order to take Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign talking points and turn them into intelligence by defrauding the American people, defrauding the intelligence agencies, lying about what the intel said. They would take something that supported a Hillary Clinton campaign talking point and they would overemphasize it and exaggerate it. They took anything that actually contradicted that narrative and they buried it deep. And through that, they actually laundered Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign talking points through the American intelligence services. That's a violation of the people's trust. That's a violation of what our intelligence services should be doing. And I absolutely think they broke the law. And you're going to see a lot of people get indicted for that. Here's the thing.
You're going to see a lot of people get indicted for that. He just said that right now. You heard it from the vice president's mouth.
Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign talking points through the American intelligence services. That's a violation of the people's trust. That's a violation of what our intelligence services should be doing. And I absolutely think they broke the law. And you're going to see a lot of people get indicted for that. Here's the thing that we should.
You're going to see a lot of people get indicted for that. That's 2026, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, Merry Christmas to everybody. To Paul Bartlett in Australia, everybody here. Merry Christmas to you and your families, and God bless you all, and Happy New Year. Happy holidays to everybody. And what can I tell you? Look, we're all witnessing and experiencing world history, U.S. history in real time. And the Democrats don't have anybody for 28. The trajectory of the country will go Trump Republican for the foreseeable 10, 15 years. JD Vance winning in 2032, we'll have at least until 2032 to protect the country from the morally superior, wonderful, and highly educated Democrats who are always livid and apoplectic and oftentimes hysterical about every topic under the sun if they don't get their way. And so the political culture in Washington, politics is going to change. The paradigm shift is going to be unbelievable. You're going to have not only the next couple of years, so you have 26 coming up, they can take the House. Don't worry about the House being taken by Democrats. There's no signature legislation they want. They have nothing in terms of a political message. They just want to impeach Trump, and it's only going to backfire. Nothing. Their entire life, the life of the Democratic Party, revolves around Donald Trump. That's it. And if you focus on negativity, and if you focus on resentment and anger and disdain and angst, you can't be successful in life, in business, in a relationship, in politics. It's impossible. It's impossible to do so. Okay, J.D. Vance is explaining why people committed crimes. He's not complaining. He's not talking about one Democrat and, saying things like we need to save ourselves from AOC or Newsom or Biden or whatever, or Clinton or Harris. Democrats, the way they speak, we need to save the country from he's dangerous. These are all apoplectic and, completely irrational, hyperbolic statements. When they called Trump dangerous or that he's a menace to the democracy, these are nonsensical, completely irrational notions. He won the popular vote. That's without media support. You think maybe there's a disconnect between Democratic strategists and the populace and the electorate? Gee, maybe there is. But anyway, I think J.D. Vance is fantastic. I like Marco Rubio. I like DeSantis a lot. But see, Rubio and DeSantis, maybe after J.D. Vance, you have Rubio as vice president for 8 years, then yes, he could be president, 2036? So, anyway, let's continue.
Really bother the American people. What do you want our intelligence community to be doing? I want them to be catching bad guys. I want them to be making sure that terrorists aren't going to kill innocent American civilians. I don't want them laundering Hillary Clinton's campaign talking points into the American media and giving them this air of legitimacy. It is sick. And it's disgusting. It hurt the intelligence community, it hurt the American people, and it hurt the first Trump administration. We have got to have consequences for it, or we're just going to see the same play repeated again and after again.
How significant did it impact the president's first term? Because remember, a lot of people didn't want to work in the administration. He was always on defense,
Sure.
saying, I didn't collude.
Sure.
What kind of an impact was there to actual policy and the impact on the American people?
Look, it certainly had an impact, Maria. The president likes to say this, and I really think it hits the nail on the head, that as much as he got accomplished, and I think the first Trump administration was a major, major success for the American people, he was both governing but also fighting to survive. Imagine if he was able to put 100% of his efforts and his attention on just doing the job of President of the United States. He had to fight back against the fake Russia collusion hoax pretty much his entire administration. That distracts resources, that distracts from the Department of Justice. That means the intelligence community is focused on that instead of on catching bad guys. It definitely had an impact. Thank God we have a president who was able to do good things for the American people despite it. But one of the reasons why I think the second Trump administration is going so well is because the administration, the people underneath them, the people behind them, the people working for them, they're not engaged in this fake garbage. We're just trying to carry out the mandate of the President of the United States. And I think we've done a very good job. We're very proud of the work that we're doing, but we're also loyal to the man who was elected by the American people.
And here we are on your 200th day, you and the president doing so much in this second term. Let's talk about the president's efforts on trade and tariffs, because
Yes.
he's not afraid to put significant tariffs on countries like India for buying Russian oil. Are you going to do a similar move to China as well? They're also buying Russian oil.
Well, the president said he's thinking about it, but he hasn't made any firm decisions. Obviously, the China issue is a little bit more complicated because our relationship with China, it affects a lot of other things that have nothing to do with the Russian situation. So the president's reviewing his options and, of course, going to make that decision when he decides. But look, what the president has used tariffs to do is two things. Number one, you saw Tim Cook just this week come in and promise $600 billion of investment to build the iPhone, to build components, to build artificial intelligence data centers right here in the United States of America. We're seeing a manufacturing boom in this country because you have a president who's telling people that if you want to sell to great American consumers, you've got to make it in America and use great American workers to do it. The second thing the tariffs are doing is it's bringing in a lot of additional revenue, which of course we're using to give tax relief to the American people and make it easier for average Americans to get by. So I think we're doing a lot on the tariff side. And it's also, the final point I'll make on this is it's an incredible negotiating tool.
Are you researching dental implants?
You tell countries that have accessed American markets and cheated for a generation, you can't get into America's market unless you pay a big fat tariff or open up your own markets. You've seen this happen with the European Union. You've seen this happen with countries in Asia. All over the world, they're opening up their markets to American goods because they don't want to pay the tariffs. So it's a great negotiating tactic. It's been great for the American people. And I think it's the most important thing, maybe aside from the border. The most important thing the president is doing is bringing back American prosperity. We're going to make more stuff in America.
Look how easy he communicates. This is fantastic. Like, I love Trump. I love President Trump. He's amazing. But he has a very unique communication style that I find fantastic, amusing. Sometimes it doesn't work on a lot of people. Sometimes it turns people off. And despite, but he has, look, President Trump has to communicate in the manner that he does because he doesn't have all of media as a public relations, monstrosity helping him. Democrats can, they have 60 Minutes. Why do you think CBS settled with President Trump? They have 60 Minutes editing to make Harris look more thoughtful or more intelligent or more, articulate. That's why they edited in, the 60 Minutes interview. When they edit with Trump, it's to try to, lie by omission, make him look bad. If you're a filmmaker or, you're making a documentary, you can edit things to either make somebody look bad or good. Same as, if you're an editor of a publication or journalist or, any type of media, you can manipulate what the viewer sees or what the reader reads. And so media without the constant support that Democrats have from most of American media, that party would not function, not win. It would be obsolete. They have to have 20. And so if you took the 2020, if you took the media from 2000 or 1999, they were, there was the whole, Oval Office, Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton thing, but in the late 90s. But if you took the media from like 2000, again, you look, media is always, they gravitated towards Bush in the early 2000s. Now they're firmly on the side of Democrats. So they're like it's like a serpent slithering towards, political power. But Trump doesn't have media though backing him up. And JD Vance, he can articulate himself in a manner that resonates with a lot of people. Okay, it'll be very difficult for media to undermine President JD Vance. Very difficult, because he's able to speak their language. That's the thing. See, Trump created his own language, which was amazing. They lied about, they created a Cold War hysteria simply to stop Trump. It didn't work. But anyway, let's continue.
Because of the president's leadership.
How long do you expect it'll take to get a real manufacturing infrastructure fired up in America? Because he's threatening 250% tariffs on pharmaceuticals, more tariffs on semiconductor chips, unless these companies commit to building it here. So how long before that can actually happen?
Well, the president you saw yesterday said so long as you're committing on semiconductors and chips to build this stuff in America, he might be willing to actually delay those tariffs a little bit. So I think in some cases it's going to take a few weeks, some cases it's going to take a few months, some cases it will take longer, but the basic idea is very simple. If you are investing in America, if you're building a new facility, building a new factory, we're going to reward you for it. If you're investing outside of this country, if you're trying to cheat and bring foreign product to undercut the wages of American workers and American businesses, then you're going to pay a very stiff penalty. That principle is what now drives the American economy, and people can make their own decisions. Yeah, you can make it overseas if you want, as the president said, but you're going to pay a big fat tariff before you access America's market, so you might as well build it right here at home.
Is Europe as aligned with the United States as it should be? What did you make of the backlash over the Switzerland 39% tariff? I'm wondering your assessment of Europe today.
Look, we love Europe and obviously have a great relationships. We sometimes have some disagreements. I think the president was
Merry Christmas to everybody.
particularly gratified that the Europeans really have agreed and committed to open up their markets to American car manufacturers, to American farmers. Those are big wins. If you work in farming, if you work in agriculture, if you work in auto manufacturing, the Europeans really are tearing down some barriers. So we're very grateful to that, and we hope to build on that relationship economically in the coming years.
Well, look, the president has been floating you along with Marco Rubio as your partner for the next election. Have you spoken to Secretary Rubio about this?
I saw Marco about a month ago. We just laughed at the whole thing because neither one of us are focused on politics. We're focused on actually doing a good job for the American people. And the way that I think about it, Maria, is if we do a good job.
That's the sound of an American.
That's the reward in and of itself. That all have made a big difference in the lives of our country for the last 6 months, the next 3.5 years. But if we do a good job, the politics will take care of itself. Let's just focus on that. I think, as the president said, it's way too early to be thinking about the political future. It's frankly way too early to be thinking about 2026. It's certainly way too early to be thinking about 2028.
So he's going to obviously run for president. He will win the presidency really quickly. I mean, Turning Point reveals conservatives all in on Vance 2028 run. But you look at here, do you see a world where Newsom wins 8 points nationally? Do you see that world? They say that AOC defeats Newsom. I mean, the polls have been wrong since 2016. And 2012 they weren't entirely accurate, but 2016. And I was telling people Clinton would lose. And it was Comey's letter, by the way, that sunk Clinton's campaign. It wasn't the Russians. That was completely made up. But I knew that some kind of an outlandish, preposterous thing would take place. And of course, Comey wrote the Comey letter because Uma Abedin was forwarding classified data to Anthony Weiner. Only Democrats could get away with that. But anyway. And then the New York Times published that, which it wasn't really public knowledge, so nobody knows how they got it. Oh, potentially a leak. Oh, we don't know. Anyway, that's a whole other story. From Comey, possibly, potentially, like the Honorable James Comey says, potentially. Do you see a world where where Newsom is 8 points up nationally over Vance? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll just repeat myself for the next half hour. We do 1 hour live streams generally. Do you see a world where Newsom is up 8 points nationally to my amazing viewers around the world and in the U.S.? Do you see a reality where, because that was a Yahoo News poll apparently, okay? So I don't see that. But anyway, let's continue.
But you are expecting to run for president in 28.
I'm not going to break that news today, Maria. What I'm going to do is focus for the next year and a half on doing a really good job for the American people, winning the midterm elections in 2026, and then we can talk about politics after that.
Can you give us some clarity on this meeting that is reportedly happening or happened last night at the White House about the Epstein files and how you're communicating the Epstein story?
So I've seen so many different fake reports about this, so let me set the record straight. There was no meeting at my house last night. There just wasn't.
Was there a meeting at the White House?
We did meet at the White House yesterday, but not at the time that they said that we were going to meet, and not about the subject that they said that we were going to meet about. We have a great FBI director and a great Department of Justice lead, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and we met to talk about how to ensure we have justice for the American people. We actually didn't talk about the Epstein issue at all. That was never meant to be the subject of the meeting, and it's one of those things where I guess somebody leaked a calendar entry maybe, and then people assumed that it must have been about Epstein, even though it had nothing to do with Epstein. On the Epstein issue, what the president has said very clearly, because we've had other meetings about that, is that he wants us to be fully transparent and he wants the credible information out there. So we're working to compile the thousands and thousands of documents that are out there for full transparency. But I have to say, Maria, I laugh at the Democrats who are now all of a sudden so interested in the Epstein files. For 4 years, Joe Biden and the Democrats did absolutely nothing about this story. We know that Jeffrey Epstein had a lot of connections with left-wing politicians and left-wing billionaires, and now President Trump has demanded full transparency from this, and yet somehow the Democrats are attacking him and not the Biden administration, which did nothing for 4 years.
Was it the right move for Comer to send subpoenas to the Clintons?
It absolutely was, and it drives home how, while the Democrats have tried to make this Epstein thing about anything but, the fact that Democrat billionaires and Democrat political leaders went to Epstein Island all the time, who knows what they did, but it's totally reasonable to ask these questions. What you saw in the House's subpoena.
Who was going on that island? Democrats or Trump Republicans? So who was going on that island? You have two Democrats stating that Jeffrey Epps was a constituent. He was a constituent. Yeah, he was a constituent of Democrats. He was giving to Democrats. He gave most of his money to Democrats.
Is they are trying to investigate all of the things related to this particular case. I know a lot of Americans want answers. I certainly want answers. And I think James Comer and the team of the House, they're doing the right thing. And of course, we know that Clinton, or allegedly he went to the island 26 times, 28 times. Totally appropriate for Comer to be asking what was going on at that island.
Let me get your quick take on growth and this moment in time that we're at, AI, crypto, et cetera, et cetera. The Securities and Exchange Commission launching Project Crypto. What do you want digital assets to look like? And also, what about the impact of AI on jobs? Is there a plan now to fill those holes for the jobs that no doubt will go away because AI makes everything so much more productive?
There's a lot of talk about robots destroying all the jobs. There's a lot of talk about how AI is going to destroy everybody's job. I actually don't see the evidence of that. What I think is that AI, there are some issues. I worry about the surveillance state because
there's a lot of dangerous issues, a lot of unfortunate issues. People are going to lose a lot of jobs. So, and the human element from a lot of industries will, potentially be lost. And it's like, I can't, if there's like a, it'd be difficult. The good thing about having a YouTube channel where you can articulate your thoughts is that, I don't know if you'd want an AI, duplicate of me, okay, or any other, person on YouTube. It's kind of like that, if your personality or who you are is part of your business, then that's, if you are a writer, if you are an author, if you're an artist, if you're a content creator, that's going to be difficult for the super intelligent robots to take over those fields. If you're potentially an accountant, there could be a time an accountant, even certain lawyers, attorneys, or legal help. If math is a huge part of your business or industry or what you do for employment, if it's something that can be duplicated by a computer, that's not a good thing. Plumbers, God bless plumbers. I love plumbers. We'll always have a job forever. Okay. There's this scene from History of the World to pump the you-know-what right out of your house. Anyway, hit subscribe if you're new. Merry Christmas.
Artificial intelligence is going to be used for that. I really worry about invasions of people's privacy because AI could be used for that. There are definitely concerns with AI, but I think that the big risk is fundamentally you've got a bunch of very left-wing people who might use AI to censor people and drive a very left-wing narrative using artificial intelligence. In some ways, they're going to do with AI what they tried to do with big tech. Those are the things that we're really focused on, the dangers that we're really focused on. But Maria, there's a lot of upside too. And if you got to focus on the dangers, but you've also got to focus on the opportunity. I think it's going to help us cure diseases in amazing ways. I think it's going to lead to a boom in construction jobs. I think we're going to be able to do things that we weren't able to do before. And there might be some disruptions, but fundamentally when it comes to jobs, we ought to be focused on the ways in which AI is going to create great productivity and great new economic opportunities. What I worry about is the focus on the job destroying effects of AI distract us from the fact that AI could be used to create new surveillance systems, that AI could be used to censor conservatives or other people in new and very scary ways. That's what we're focused on. I think it's the right danger, but also the right opportunity for us to focus on.
And just the final question on China, because nobody does surveillance better than China. What else can the U.S. do to keep China in a box? Because they're undermining us at every turn. Just this week, Senator Tom Cotton sent a letter to Intel about its CEO because it was selling secrets to companies tied to the Chinese military.
Yep.
Is there anything else to be done there that you'd like to discuss?
Well, there is, and this is where it goes back to having a really great FBI director and a really great attorney general, is that when people are stealing America's secrets or stealing our corporate intellectual property and sending it to anywhere, we've got to prosecute that stuff. We know that Chinese companies have been really big offenders when it comes to the theft of American intellectual property. We got to prosecute that stuff and push back against that stuff. We have to make sure that we don't have people who are spying on American companies, either in our education laboratories or in the companies themselves. But the most important thing that we need to do is we need to protect our own manufacturing. The way that China was able to catch up to us technologically is that they took all of these great manufacturing industries and built a whole technology infrastructure on top of that manufacturing base. We've got to rebuild our own country, rebuild our own innovative capacity. The president has taken huge strides over.
And again, that's what's going to help J.D. Vance, his ability to articulate complex issues in a concise manner. Okay, CBS won't need to, Fox News won't need to edit J.D. Vance in the manner that CBS edited Harris. Okay, you don't hear AOC talk about this. You don't hear AOC usually either she has a social media style of communicating. Euphemisms, talking points, complaining about a lot of things. No real answers. Lofty, idealistic statements. Newsom kind of has that, Clint Eastwood type of, kind of amusing persona. Who knows when that persona came about, and it's like he's going to have to convince the entire country that turning it into a blue state is a good thing. But J.D. Vance, Trump does well, he will. The economy will be very good next year, better than it is this year, much better. Okay, we're still experiencing, things are still expensive because we had 4 years of Biden and Trump implemented the tariffs to bring manufacturing home. And still we're growing as a country. There were going to be growing pains from the tariffs. That's obvious. But we need that to alleviate poverty. Okay, outsourcing causes poverty. A manufacturing plant leaves a community, or jobs leave a community, all those, how are you going to, find a job immediately after the place you've worked for a while, goes to another country, and is outsourced to another country. So anyway, Vance is able to articulate his thoughts very well. Let's continue.
Now, yesterday I sat down with the Vice President, J.D. Vance, in Washington, where we covered a number of topics, including the radicalization of the Democratic Party, President Trump's foreign policy, and Operation Arctic Frost. Here's more of that exclusive interview. Take a look. The Democratic Party has been radicalized. You see this with Mamdani.
Yeah.
You hear the rhetoric, I'm sure, the likes of Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker. If you were to ask me today who probably the leading contender for Democrats is, and he's gotten angry. We used to actually get along. His last text to me was not exactly very pleasant. I might tell you offline, but I will keep the confidence.
I'm very curious about this, Sean.
Oh yeah, it got my attention. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But in all fairness, I think he sees that his only path is to go hardcore left-wing base. AOC, Old Guard has to go. Mamdani, the Squad, AOC, Jasmine Crockett, Grandpa Bernie, Pocahontas. They really are the power.
Grandpa Bernie. And then Elizabeth Warren. Yes, Elizabeth Warren. Very genuine. They were all very genuine people.
Schumer's done. He's finished.
Schumer's done.
By the way, this is something that Bernie Sanders wanted to tell Elizabeth Warren. Lizzie, thank you so very much for endorsing me. Thank you. In 2016, remember when you gave me an endorsement for president before they cheated me? Remember? Remember, Elizabeth Warren? When you copied my entire political game plan, all my my platform, you copied it, you cut and pasted my entire platform. Remember when you gave me that rousing endorsement for president in 2016, Elizabeth Warren? That's right, it never happened. You endorsed Hillary Clinton. Nobody knows why. Did you think you would be vice president? Who knows? But thank you again, Elizabeth, for endorsing Bernie Sanders, Grandpa Bernie. Of course, I'm being facetious. That never happened. Warren endorsed Clinton in 2016. Yes, that's the way the Democrats roll. And by the way, Trump is the most dangerous president we've ever had because he's going to make the country great again. We can't have that.
I think the far left has completely taken over that party. In particular, what bothers me is the rhetoric around violence. I mean, if you look at the way, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, that these guys were justifying it, making excuses for it. Most of them weren't explicitly endorsing it, but all of them would say, well, Charlie Kirk said some controversial things. And I would say, as his friend, so what? You say some controversial things in the United States of America, and that's what you're focused on after a father of two young children is murdered in cold blood in the public. It's horrible. And your attitude should be, when something like that happens, I don't care what you said, I don't care what political disagreements were, that was wrong. Murdering somebody is wrong, full stop, no follow-up, no caveats, no hums and ha's. Just have the moral clarity to actually say murdering people who you disagree with is disgusting and wrong. That's how I think fundamentally you end political violence in this country, is you have leaders on both the left and the right who are willing to condemn it without any exception. Unfortunately, you've got a lot of people on the far left who are not willing to condemn it without exception. I also asked Sean, I'm fundamentally an empathetic person. I try to understand where other people are coming from. And when I see people voting for a communist in New York City for mayor, when I see people voting for radicalism all over our country, especially young Americans, the question I'm asking myself is, what happened under the Biden administration to so radicalize young people? And there's a chart, actually, Charlie Kirkwood sent it to me, and it was the percentage of Americans who are married and own a home has fallen off a cliff. The percentage of young Americans who are married and have owned a home. We're trying to rebuild that and fix that by...
Mortgage rates increased, over doubled under Biden. Okay, that's why people can't afford homes. Mortgage rates doubled under Biden. Why? Because interest rates increased exponentially to combat inflation that Biden's policies caused, or that Democratic policies before him, but Biden's policies caused.
Bringing down the cost of housing by actually making it possible to build a life with somebody, making it more affordable to live a good life with the person that you love. But the reason why I think so many people are radicalized is because the Biden administration was such a disaster, and that's why what we're doing is so important. If you look at the history, if you look at communist revolutions in the past, it always comes from young people, and it always comes from young people who have been radicalized. I think the way to de-radicalize people is to actually give them a better opportunity and a better future and a better path forward. It's why I'm so honored to serve the President of the United States, because that's what he asks us every single day. How do we serve the interests of Americans first? That focus is why I think we're going to rebuild the American dream, and why the far left is not going to win in this country, because they're going to realize there's a better pathway out there. We're charting it every single day.
I have just two more questions, and you've been very generous with your time.
So Democrats will win. Let's say they win the House. Okay. They'll lose in 2028. When they lose in 2028, that is going to be the beginning of the end of whatever paradigm was created the past 10 plus years within the Democratic Party. I mean, it's already the modern day Democratic Party has lost momentum, has no direction, has nobody, on deck to, waiting to become president, or, that they can rally around. There are no signature pieces of legislation they want. The ACA isn't working. They want subsidies because the ACA is too expensive. It did not bring costs down. Costs have gone up. And what do they stand for? Not single payer. They used to want single payer, but they don't even have single payer in Vermont. Bernie Sanders doesn't even have Medicare for all in Vermont. Why? Very small state. And so what do they stand for? Nobody knows. Trump wants to enforce immigration laws. They just don't like it. They don't want to defund ICE. They just don't like it. And so they have media pushing one narrative, risking, ICE officials, law enforcement officials risk their lives. So Democrats went from championing Capitol police officers to going after other law enforcement officials. So there's no rhyme or reason. But Trump stands for tariffs, enforcing immigration laws, peace deals, stopping the flow of illegal narcotics, which has involved a more militant approach I would rather he not engage in, but he's still the anti-war president. He's not a pacifist. When people say, "You see what he's doing," it's like, it's very different from what Bush and President Obama did. Very different. A lot less militant, even though it is militant. But anyway, let's continue.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
We haven't talked at all about foreign policy.
Sure.
It definitely has defined your first year as vice president, the president's first year. He's been very active in helping to resolve conflict and war around the world. Absolutely. He's expended tremendous political capital. I describe it as the Trump doctrine. I think I'm the only one that talks about it, maybe.
We should all talk about it more, because I do think it's a unique perspective on American foreign policy, but it's the right perspective. But go ahead.
Well, you know what? Why don't you pick it up from there? Because it's new in a lot of ways. It's kind of a combination of ideas, but no forever wars. However, we identify evil where it exists. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have the most powerful military on the face of the earth. Doesn't mean we won't use that military. Taking out Iran's nuclear sites, the ISIS caliphate, etc. I think it's the perfect balance. Obviously, some people disagree. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so you hear this term peace through strength, and I would say, if anything, the Trump doctrine, I've never talked to the president about this, but I would add something. I would say peace through strength and wisdom. And here's what that means to me. First of all, he's focused on peace because he recognizes that conflict is destabilizing. Conflict leads to refugee crises. Conflict leads to food prices skyrocketing for American citizens. So he's focused on peace. The way to achieve peace is to be the strongest military in the world, to be able to go anywhere you need to, because very often, if people know you can come, that's what allows you to establish peace in the first place, that deterrence effect. But it's also uniquely wise. And I would always say this when I was in the Senate. What made the president's first term foreign policy was so successful, and I think the second term too, it's not just the strength part, it's the wisdom part. Because there are so many people, for example, people say, how could he he have gone and visited Kim Jong-un in North Korea? Doesn't he know that person's evil? And the President of the United States says, whatever you think about the person, why not sit down and have a conversation and try to understand if there are ways to advance America's interests? I've heard so many people criticize the President of the United States for talking to Vladimir Putin. You don't have to agree with Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine, but if you want to bring about peace, you've got to be strong. You've also got to talk to people. You've got to engage in that aggressive, engaged diplomacy. And I think the President of the United States, his doctrine is to have the strongest military in the world, to focus on peace, but not to allow the DC press corps to tell you who you're allowed to talk to and how you're allowed to engage in diplomacy. That rejection of that conventional wisdom, that's a critical part of the Trump doctrine, and why I think, foreign policy-wise, I don't think there's been a president in a generation who's even come close. I was born in the era of Reagan. I was 4 years old when Reagan left office. I've never seen a president who's accomplished so much, who's achieved so much peace, who's been able to advance America's economic interests through his foreign policy. People talk about foreign policy, and of course, foreign means not in the United States. But how do you think that we're able to get these trade deals? How do you think that we're able to bring in hundreds of billions of dollars through tariffs? How do you think we're able to bring in $18 trillion in new investments? There's a foreign policy element to that, and I really think it's a very unique perspective. But I actually think, even though the Democrats won't ever admit it, that administrations for the next 40 or 50 years are going to be guided by the Trump doctrine in the same way people were guided by the Monroe Doctrine 200 years ago.
The future of the country will be Trump Republican, not only because President Trump is a great president, but because Democrats have been so inept, utterly inept the past 10 years. They tried to destroy Trump's first presidency. Then they got Biden in office, which is a catastrophe. Then they have Trump 2.0, and he is going to indict, and tariffs and enforce immigration and everything else he's going to do. Prevent endless wars, everything Democrats don't like. In 2026, the economy is going to rebound. And then J.D. Vance is going to take over in 28. Tell me who Democrats have to stop J.D. Vance. There's nobody they have. Anyway, God bless you all. I'll be back tonight at 10 p.m. Be here at 10 p.m., everybody. Thanks, everybody. God bless you. Hey, to my super chat, thank you.